Well, it is a tough job to stay a world-class city, and a tough job to run a world-class arts organization. Now, you mentioned term limits for board members.
Oh, yes.
And so I'm curious how you see that playing out. What should be a reasonable term limit for a board member, and what, if there's anything, could a board member do that should immediately end their membership on a board? There might not be anything. You tell me.
Well, they're ethical standards, so that's pretty easy. Term limits, I know Stratford actually has term limits, 2 terms plus you can extend that if you're chair.
Most arts organizations actually do have term limits. It's the corporate boards that did not have term limits.
Oh, okay. Well, because of course you're on a corporate board, you're with your buddies and it's fun and you're getting paid. Why would you want to leave?
How does an arts theater get on these paid boards?
You'd actually be a good board member.
Keep me in mind.
I mean, clearly the key thing is to judge how long you can maintain the enthusiasm of an individual for whom this is not their principal occupation.
I might say that's Julia Foster speaking, who happens to be my wife, who just retired as chair of the National Arts Center in Ottawa and chair of York University. So she has experience.
Expertise on the panel and in the audience.
Yeah, and at home. You know where I get my ideas from.
You know, it's a good point about board engagement. So I'm wondering, how should we as arts administrators seek to keep our board members engaged? What are a couple of good first steps?
Well, step 1 is the committee structure. You get them on committees, you get them active, you get them involved. And you have to have people that are passionate about what you're doing. But my own experience is people only come on the boards that they truly care about in terms of the organization and what it's doing. Nobody's going to go on the Symphony board if they don't love Symphony, would they?
I think some people would. I think if they were interested in some of the things we're doing in education now, it's a bit more diversified. But, but you're right, if they're not passionate about music, they wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
I think key for me, and again, I'm not necessarily perfect at this, but regular updates to the board, so they're engaged at the meetings, but also so much today is happening with government, fundraising, new projects on an ongoing basis. The worst thing ever, and I am so guilty of this, so completely guilty of this, is for a board member to go out to a party and be talking to someone else who's met with me or heard something indirectly, and they hear, oh, isn't that great, that new thing the Toronto Symphony is doing, and the board member doesn't know that we're doing it. So the more you can do to keep people engaged, the better, I would say. Over-communicate.
So should there be a mandatory minimum of engagement from a board director so that they actually know what their nonprofit organization or arts organization, how it's performing and what's coming down the pipes? Is this an essential qualification?
But that's just reporting from management to the board, and that responsibility probably falls on the chair more than anybody else to make sure that there's full, as you said, transparency at the very beginning, that there's full, true, plain disclosure to the board, and that they're aware as to what's going on. But back to limits, you know, we've seen organizations where people do stay on too long, and that in particular happens when someone is a strong financial supporter. And so they'll have a high level of interest, and they're active, and they stay generous, but then they slip, and that's tricky. That's tricky to manage. And you know, you can create, as Stratford has done, a Senate. We have something at Artscape called Ambassador. you know, you can try and create these other categories to hold a linkage to them. The last thing you should do is just let them go. So at least you try and reach out and hang on to them in some way.
I think many arts organizations do a poor job of that. Every of the 4 organizations I've run, it's always surprising to look at past board members and find that many of them we haven't communicated with much in the last 10 years. And inevitably there's one who left the board and then 10 years later wrote a huge check to somebody else, which may have been the way they were tracking anyways, but I've also seen examples where board members have been on a board for 20 years, and in year 18 they wrote a $7 million check or something along those lines, and you hate to imagine what might have happened had they been removed at year 6 and lost touch with the institution. So I think it's a little bit more complicated in an arts environment where people are not being paid, but at the end of the day, you do need renewal on a board, so whether you find an honorary advisory council that stays engaged, there has to be some other mechanism to keep them involved.
You know, the other thing to comment upon is it's not just diversity. You also, I believe, need age diversity, because we have young people like you who are passionate and care, and you do bring a view